Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to feel greater peace and wholeness in your life, then do we have the Transformation Show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. James S. Gordon, Harvard-educated psychiatrist, researcher at the National Institute of Mental Health, chairman of the White House Commission of Complementary and Alternative Medicine Policy, clinical professor at Georgetown Medical School, and the author of one of the most important books I've ever read, The Transformation. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about discovering wholeness and healing after trauma to live your greatest life. That, plus we'll talk about mood rings and imagining lemons, PTSD and parrots, whirling, shaking, and dancing, soft bellies and chaotic breathing, and what in the world swaying ox carts have to do with anything. Gotcha. So welcome to the show, Jim. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready. And you got me ready by reminding both of us that we should breathe deeply and relax and just be present. So thank you.
Absolutely. Can't think of anything more important. So we're going to talk briefly about your story here, and then we're going to dive into healing trauma, and then later a meditation. But before we do that, what are two common and dangerous misconceptions about psychological trauma?
Well, I think I know the first one is that trauma just comes to some people, people who were raised in the most horribly abusive and neglectful homes, or those who've lived through wars or terrible climate-related disasters, and that for most of us, it's not such an important subject. Well, it's not true. Trauma comes to all of us sooner or later. It's not apart from our lives, not some separate, strange thing, but it's a part of being human. And if it doesn't come early because we've been neglected or abused or grown up in poverty or had historical trauma because of our race or our ethnicity, it's likely to come when we're adults and we deal with all the challenges of illnesses and of disappointments in relationships and terrible worries about our kids and maybe loss of a job. And if not, then it will surely come if we live long enough as we get frail and lose people we love and deal with our own death. So that's the first misconception, that it only comes to some of us. It comes to all of us, which in a way is not happy news, but also is reassuring and tells us that when it does come, it's not something so weird and strange and insoluble. And then the second misconception is that if you have been traumatized, that you're going to be crippled by it for the rest of your life, and that you're going to need constant therapy, and that you're going to be somehow less than you were before. That's not true either. And that's why I wrote The Transformation, is to give people a program to move through and beyond trauma, to balance out the mind, the body, and the spirit, and to use trauma as a doorway to discovering who we can be.
Thank you. And that's why actually you said before it's not happy news. I'm actually going to see it as happy news, which is I feel like we're a society, if not a world, walking around with unhealed, unrecognized traumas. I mean, this is September 10th. We're recording this. Tomorrow is 9/11. And we actually uploaded our show when we first started years ago on 9/11 to bring light to the world, to help people to heal the trauma. Because if we can get at those traumas, doesn't it change everything?
It does, and I think that's a really important point, because trauma is the soil in which wisdom grows. It's a wisdom school as we deal with our trauma.
So
yes.
Speaking of wisdom school, let's talk about a wisdom teacher who may have schooled you. Who was Diana, and how did she rock your world?
Well, Diana was a patient who came when I was a young psychiatric resident. I was a resident in psychiatry at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx, and I was working in a public hospital in the Bronx. And Diana was there, came in the emergency room late one night and announced to me that the guy she'd been in therapy with, the resident she'd been in therapy with for the last couple of years, was leaving. And she was very seriously considering killing herself. And I'm sitting there in the middle of the night, she said it very matter-of-fact way. And at first I was very taken aback and I was very worried, but I don't remember whether I learned, I was already learning how to breathe slowly and deeply, but I'm sure I took at least a deep breath and asked her what was going on.
Mhm.
And that way, that began a relationship which was an exploration of why she had come to feel this way, but was also what a teacher of mine, R.D. Lang, called what he called psychotherapy.
Mhm.
He said it was the obdurate attempt of two people to recover the wholeness of being human between them. So
Wow.
we started this relationship in the middle of the night in an emergency room in the Bronx, and I was helping her discover why she had come to this place of despair, and then doing my best to help her move through it, to help her mobilize the great strength that was there inside her, in spite of the despair that she was feeling. And at the same time, she was teaching me not only about how to do psychotherapy, but also about myself, about my own concerns, my own anxiety, and bringing up for me sometimes the trauma that I had experienced in my life. And so she became my patient, but she also became my teacher.
Woohoo! And who was and she got much better. It took many years. I mean, this is somebody who was diagnosed. I don't know if it was bipolar, schizophrenia, pretty much everything on the DSM.
She was called all of those things, but probably most people called her a borderline personality. That is, she was on the border between neurosis and psychosis, between being at times mad and at other times pretty sane, and all kinds of things had happened in her life as we began to discover. In the beginning, the crucial thing, and I think this is something for people who are hoping to work with other people to help them make this transformation,
Yeah.
it was really us getting to know each other and me being willing to be there with her and allow her to discover and to share what was going on, and which sometimes required me to deal with my own anxieties,
Yeah.
my own concerns about her, and my own concerns about my own ability. So it was a very profound process that went on between me and her for about 2 years. And the ultimate lesson was that even someone who is really troubled and who has been given all these diagnostic labels still has the capacity to go inside, to find strength, to access her own inner wisdom, and to change profoundly. And her healing process continued after those 2 years because she'd been very deeply traumatized by the way she grew up.
I love that you're mentioning this. You hit a trigger, as if one of your words, in me, which is my first long-term relationship. A girl had been, as a child, she had been very badly sexually abused, and she was diagnosed at the end, toward the end of our relationship, as borderline and unfixable. And really, first off, I don't like that word fix. There's nothing wrong with us. There are things we get to work on, but
Yeah.
nothing could be further from the truth, could it?
Not, I don't like the word fix. I don't like the word borderline.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right,
This is
oh, go for it.
no, it's true. It's not like we're automobile mechanics trying to
Thank you.
fix either somebody else's automobile or our own. We're human beings, and we're here to make discoveries about ourselves. We're here to learn and grow, and to create the conditions for this amazing organism that is us to grow and change as it wants and needs to. And that's the purpose of the transformation. I think that's the purpose of anybody who is here to be of service to other people.
And if we want to go from a woo-woo perspective, to me, while I don't wish it on anyone, we each came in here with an individual path, and if we can choose to frame it as so, each of these things can be used for tremendous growth.
Yes, and this is it's an aboriginal understanding, is that our greatest challenges are our greatest opportunities for growth, and that as we meet them and move through them, we discover who we are meant to be. This is an understanding that I've encountered all over the world that unfortunately we've forgotten in our current medical system, and to a significant degree, we're not paying attention to in psychiatry, in my profession, and even in some of the other mental health professions. And so much anxiety, so much desire to control, so much fear and sort of fear, and at the same time, a desperate clinging to diagnostic labels. Harry Stack Sullivan, who's another great psychiatrist, did a lot of work with people who are called schizophrenic. This is in the 40s and 50s. And what Sullivan said was, we are all more simply human than otherwise. And that's the deep message, that we're all going to have these challenges, and that we all can call on or learn to call on all these aspects of our humanity to help us heal ourselves.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So people come into our lives just when we need it. They say, as the student is ready, the teacher appears, and they call us forward. And there was one who came into your life who looked and moved like a big cat.
Well, this was a man named Sham Singha, and he was, by his own description, a mad Indian. And I first heard about Sham. A friend of mine called me, Richard Valentine by name, called me from England one day. And this was 1973. It was the first time I'd ever gotten a call from overseas, which was remarkable. But much more remarkable was that I'd never talked with Richard on the telephone because he was deaf. And I said, Richard, what is going on? And he said, well, I'm going to see this crazy Indian, and he's sticking me full of acupuncture needles, and he put me on a fast of grapes and hot water for 60 days, and I think my hearing is better. I said, Richard, I know your hearing is better. And he said, well, yeah, he said, yeah, it is. I'm bringing, this man is named Sham Singha. He's an osteopath, herbalist, acupuncturist, meditation master. He's coming to Florida. Would you be interested in setting up something for him in Washington, D.C.? I said, absolutely. This was a time I was a researcher at the National Institute of Mental Health. I was becoming very interested in other than conventional ways of healing, not only psychological distress, but also chronic physical problems. So Richard brought Sham to see me, and I first looked at him, and I knew I'd never met anyone like this up close before. He looked like a big cat. He had yellow eyes. He had this long, flowing, dark hair, but unlike me, I was long hair then when I still had hair. He was wearing a Savile Row suit, and he walked around and he moved, as you said, he moved like a big cat. And as he started talking to me about Chinese medicine and about yin and yang and heaven, earth, and man and the five elements, I was totally mesmerized. I knew that he knew something that I didn't know. And then when he came to stay with me for a few days in the country where I was living with my girlfriend, he and Richard's girlfriend and my girlfriend Sharon and I were all together on our farm, and we got snowed in. And Sham came into the kitchen, he clapped his hands, and he said, okay, what do we have to eat? And out of the leftovers and the canned food and the things that we'd never even thought to eat, he made the most extraordinary meal I'd ever had in my life. And as I ate this food, and first of all, I prepared it with him, and he explained to me the rules of Chinese medicine that were governing how he prepared and cooked the meal. So that was really interesting to me. And then as I ate the food, I could feel my consciousness change. I could feel myself more alert. I could feel myself more peaceful. I was kind of swooning as I ate the food. And I said to myself, whatever this guy knows, I want to know it. I want to somehow, I didn't know exactly how, I want to somehow have the kind of experience, have the kind of vision, have that capacity to bring into everyday things like the cooking of food, this absolute miracle of, to use the word I use for the book, transformation, transforming this kind of nothing food and these weird combinations into something indescribably delicious.
Awesome. So let's go from there, and we're going to talk about transformation now. First off, and we're going to be diving back into Sham. He kind of influences everything in this book, I would say, on some level. Let's talk about how much of today's problems do you think are caused by unresolved traumas, large or small?
I think so much of what happens with us is caused by unresolved trauma. This was Freud's great insight at the end of the 19th century, the effect of childhood trauma on later adult symptoms of distress, psychological distress. He took back some of what he said later on, but I think he was absolutely spot on. And that if you talk with people, particularly people who will say, I don't know exactly why I feel this way. I feel so anxious in this situation. You look at them and you wonder, well, why are they feeling so anxious? Or I can't relate to people. Somehow I can't come close enough. Or, I'm not satisfied, even though I'm doing really well on my job. All these things that are mysterious as I get to know people like that, as I've come to know them, many people like that over the last 50 years, it often relates to childhood experience, childhood trauma that they have forgotten, they've suppressed it, or they've repressed it, and they've kept it down. And then there are also the traumas that come to us in adult life that are much more obvious. I'm thinking of somebody whom I write about in the book who's in a terrible car accident. She'd been very sociable, outgoing, strong, very strong woman, strong executive. After this really bad car accident, she got very insecure. She didn't want to have anything to do with anybody. She retreated. She wouldn't socialize with people. She was not only anxious about being in a car, she was anxious about any strange situation. So there are two kinds of trauma. There's the trauma that we've forgotten that affects us in ways that are difficult for us to understand and very insidious and can undermine our lives. And then there's the more obvious trauma where we understand the trauma, but we don't know what to do with it. So how do we cope with this change in our lives that's come about?
So, and let's talk about one of these people. And it's interesting. When my wife first came into my life and she didn't want to date me, I said, I've healed all my trauma, my childhood wounds. Yeah. Okay. Who was Azar, and what was the 60-minute episode?
Azar is a little girl. She was 9 when that episode was filmed of 60 Minutes, and when I first got to know her. She's now about 13. She's a little girl in Gaza, and her father was killed in the 2014 war between Hamas and Israel. Her father was killed, her 2 uncles were killed, an aunt was killed, her home was destroyed, her whole neighborhood. She lived in the Shujaya neighborhood, completely destroyed. She came into one of our mind-body skills groups at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. We've trained now over 6,000 people around the world to use the method in the transformation. And this particular group that Azar was in was a group of children 8 to 10 years old, all of whom had lost their fathers in that 2014 war. There were 8 kids in the group. And in the first group, we begin teaching them slow, deep, soft belly breathing to help the kids relax, just as we did before we got on.
Absolutely. I'm still doing right now.
So that continues, and we keep on teaching that. And then we have the kids do drawings, and that's what I also do at the beginning of the transformation. And we have them draw themselves, and then themselves with their biggest problem, and then themselves with the solution to the problem. When Azar drew herself, she was this little tiny stick figure in the corner of the page with her mouth turned down. And when she drew her biggest problem, her house was being destroyed. It was being bombed by Israeli planes. Her father was lying next to the house, the destroyed house, in a patch of blood. Her 2 uncles were dead next to the father, and then her aunt was dead as well. That was her biggest problem, the loss, the death. The solution to the problem, that was very, of course, distressing.
Yeah.
Solution was even more distressing. She drew herself in a coffin with her father in a grave. And I said, what's this? And she said, well, that's me with my father in the grave. I want the Israelis to kill me so that I can be with my father. That's the only solution for me. There's nothing for me in this life. So I'm sitting there with her, feeling this incredible pain. Then she came through our group. She did the techniques that I described, that I teach in the transformation. She was in 9 groups, led by a school teacher in Gaza. And at the end of the 9 groups, after she'd done soft belly breathing, she'd done guided mental imagery, she'd done some work with fast, deep breathing and shaking and dancing, and she'd looked to her family tree to find strengths. She was doing all kinds of experiments in discovering things about herself and in learning how she could help and heal herself, and sharing her experience with the other kids and the group leader. In the 9th group, she did another set of drawings. And this time, when she drew herself, she was a big girl. She occupied the good part of the page. She was wearing a skirt.
Yeah.
You could see her long brown curls, which she had in real life. There was an arrow coming from her chest through a heart. And in the heart, it was written in English, which she was learning in school, "I love nature." And the arrow was headed for this big, beautiful tree with green leaves all over it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. The next picture was equivalent to draw yourself with your problem solved. It was draw who you would like to be, or how you would hope to be. And she drew herself in a white coat with a stethoscope in her ears and the resonator of the stethoscope on the chest of a figure lying on a table. I said, "What's happening here?" She said, "I am a doctor. I am a heart doctor, and this is my patient. After the war in Gaza, there are a lot of people whose hearts have been hurt, and I am going to take care of them." And I said, "Well, who are these 5 figures standing nearby?" And she looked at me with this big grin on her face, and she said, "Oh, those are my other patients. They're waiting for me." I said, "Great." And then the third drawing is, how are you going to get there? And she drew herself at a desk with books piled all around. She said, "I'm going to study very hard so I can go to medical school." And that's what's been happening. She's been, before she came into our group, she wasn't able to focus. She was having difficulty sleeping. She was anxious all the time. And obviously she wanted to die. After the groups, she became this beautiful, girl full of love, full of compassion, studying hard. She taught all the techniques she'd learned to her family and to other kids. And that continues. 3, 4 years later, she's doing fine. So she's a beautiful example of what's possible, that somebody who is in despair, is suicidal, can learn these tools and techniques for transformation and move through this terrible trauma and come out on the other side.
Would you encourage all of us, if we were to take one homework assignment from today, and we're going to go into a lot of how-tos right now, but to do these 3 drawings ourselves right after we shut this off?
I think it's a great idea. That's a way that everybody can do the drawings. They can see where they are now. Mm-hmm. And then as they practice the techniques that are there in the transformation, which hopefully everyone will read, as they work on themselves and make discoveries over a period of time, when they feel that the time is right, I do this at the end of the transformation, there are the second set of drawings to do. And then, just as with Azar, compare the first set to the second set. And the difference is almost always very striking.
Awesome. So let's go from there. We're going to dive into a whole bunch of techniques today. You say meditation is the antidote for trauma. Let's start with what she learned, soft belly breathing. What is this?
Soft belly breathing, this is a technique I learned from Stephen Levine maybe 45 years ago. It's very simple. All you do is sit comfortably. It's good to close your eyes because it removes external stimulation. Yeah. And you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth with your belly soft and relaxed. And everybody can do that with me. Perhaps saying soft as you breathe in, and belly as you breathe out, saying it to yourself. And this is a concentrative meditation because you're concentrating on the breath, on the words soft belly, and on the feeling of your belly relaxing and being soft. If thoughts come, let them come. let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly. We can open our eyes now. So I feel a little more relaxed. I feel a little more present. I see you a little more clearly. How are you doing?
Blissful.
And
Blissful and giggling.
this is just 2 minutes. So anyone can do this. Very simple,
Yeah.
Obviously. And when I say it, that meditation is the antidote to trauma, what I mean is that trauma essentially keeps us chained to the past. It's not the traumatic event that continues. It's our memory of the traumatic event, the images that keep coming up, the agitation in our body, the anxiety, the agitation, the difficulty focusing, the difficulty sleeping. So it's as if we were still undergoing the trauma, even though it may have long ago passed. Meditation quiets the fight or flight response, quiets the agitation, helps us to focus, quiets and calms the center in our brain called the amygdala, responsible for fear and anger, stimulates areas in the frontal cortex, responsible for judgment, self awareness, and compassion, and stimulates areas in our brain that make it easier to connect with other people. So it is the antidote to trauma, which keeps us chained to the past, worried about the future, anxious, agitated, and having difficulty connecting with other people. And this is just one kind of meditation. This is one kind of concentrative meditation. There are also two other general categories: mindfulness meditation, focusing on becoming aware, really not focusing, simply opening your mind to be aware of thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise. That's a technique that comes from Buddhism originally, about 2,500 years old. Concentrative meditations are likely older. You can read about them in Hinduism, but every major religious system has them. And then the oldest form of meditation are expressive meditations, active movement of the body, fast, deep breathing, shaking and dancing, whirling. All are effective.
Awesome. We're going to get into an expressive one in just a minute. You just brought me back to my childhood. I grew up in what my friends, they wouldn't come visit because my parents were always fighting. And it was a kill or be killed home. And my friends would call it the crazy house. And I grew up with quote unquote ADD symptoms, which now that we're making a connection here, boy, that sounds suspiciously similar to PTSD growing up it's a different kind of a war zone, but growing up in a war zone nonetheless.
Exactly. We had similar parents and similar households.
Oh my God.
It's
I'm
not,
so
it's
sorry.
actually, it's pretty unsettling to a kid because every time you go to the dinner table, you're bracing yourself
Oh, heck yeah.
for confrontation.
Jim, I still have challenges. I've worked through a lot of this, but I know what my triggers are. And mealtime and restaurants are a trigger, that and holidays and birthdays, because of the shrapnel that's about to go flying all over the place. And I'm
Yes.
very quick. I used to get sent to my room continuously without dinner for maybe putting the fork in the wrong place. It didn't matter. To where that's still, I can still see it. I'm different. I have worked with it tremendously, but you can see the strings going all the way back.
Yes. Yeah, and we're not the only ones. It's there. But the other side of it is that as agitated as dinners were, and as sometimes everybody hurrying through their dinner to finish with this, but the other side is, at least for me, it was my first experience in dealing with my own trauma and also doing my best to help my parents deal with each other. So it was a kind of preparation for my eventual career as a psychiatrist.
I like it. And my parents, I'm fortunate enough, they're still around. When I go back and visit them, I am the counterbalance, the grounding mechanism. to help bring some calm and see what I can quietly do to meddle. They're a lot better now. I love them so dearly. They're a lot better, but I'm still working on that presence, working on what I can do to bring. They're our greatest teachers. That's the best way to put it, isn't it?
Yeah, they are. And I think the thing is that as you move through the trauma, whatever the trauma is that's come, what comes also is compassion for the
Yes.
certainly. I mean, they were also traumatized. One of the techniques we use, which people can read about in the transformation, is we construct a genogram,
Yeah.
our family tree. And as I constructed my genogram, I'd been in therapy before, and I'd certainly thought a lot about my parents. But as I drew on a piece of paper, I diagrammed my family back to their parents. I started to understand much more clearly where their trauma came from and what they brought into the relationship with each other and me. And it helped me relax a bit more with them, have some perspective and some more compassion for them.
I love it. Let's go from there. Let's go to something fun. What is shaking and dancing, and how has it helped people?
Well, you're getting into it. I can see. Look, when we're traumatized, it affects our body. We shut down. We're in fight or flight, or else we're in the freeze response. And when the trauma is really bad, fight or flight is mediated by the sympathetic nervous system, which is one part of the autonomic nervous system. It's a part responsible for getting us ready to fight or to run away.
Yeah.
Uh, but when we're totally overwhelmed, as we often are with children when we're traumatized as children, or perhaps as you were in the car accident that you had, there's nothing you could do, you're helpless in that situation. There is a last ditch mechanism that's mediated by the vagus nerve, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, deep in the brainstem, in which we shut down. We put out endorphins to numb the pain. We take a kind of psychological distance from what's happening and from our bodies. We freeze and we collapse.
You also
So
talk
when
about
people,
this with a mouse and a cat as a perfect example. Mouse
Mhm.
goes in cat's mouth, it goes limp.
Yes, that's a survival mechanism. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem is, and this is the problem with trauma, trauma is going to come. The problem ultimately is not with the trauma, but with how it persists in our lives. So when freezing persists, as it does in the lives of so many of us, sometimes along with fight or flight continuing, our body gets tight, it's shut down, we can't feel, we can't enjoy our bodies thoroughly. Maybe we're inhibited about sexual connections with other people. So we need to do something to loosen our body up, to shake things up in our body.
Yeah.
And the simplest technique is simply to shake, to stand up. If I stand up, the camera will leave me
Yeah.
behind, but
So we'll
you
do this
stand
sitting.
up, and you can do it sitting. There are some videos that we have on our website of people in wheelchairs doing shaking and dancing in the wheelchair. You sit or you stand and you shake from your feet up through your knees and chest and shoulders. And you just shake wildly and just let go. And if sounds come, you let them come. And if you do that for 5 or 6 minutes, people will feel much more relaxed afterwards, more energized. Emotions may come up, often emotions that have been buried. So that's the first phase of the shaking. And it's really important if you've experienced trauma is to do something physical to help it leave your body, to not shut your body down.
Good
Shaking and dancing is the simplest one that I know of.
good to, and I want to hear about the dancing side of things, but good to do this. Your eyes were closed, my eyes were closed. To me, it makes us, and I've done these exercises with groups before, it makes us less self-conscious
Exactly.
and allows us to really get into the shaking and the
Exactly.
dancing
Because
for that matter.
people, it's not something we usually do. Now, a lot of societies,
Mhm.
they do shaking. This is deep in our biology and deep in, if we tune into what's going on and we're like this, our intelligence, our own inner intelligence would tell us to move our bodies and to shake.
Yeah.
And many indigenous people do it. And they're so used to doing it, they keep their eyes open because they're not self conscious.
Yeah.
But we are self-conscious. This is not part of our everyday life. So it's good if you're doing it with other people to keep your eyes shut. And sometimes it's even good if you're doing it by yourself, because that way you won't be looking around distracted by everything that's there in the room with you. So the first phase is shaking. You can read about it in the transformation. You could look on our website, cmbm.org, and get instructions there. 5-6 minutes, then a couple minutes of just relaxing, being aware of our breathing and our body, and then put on music that moves you, music that's inspiring, that's energizing for you, and let yourself move to it. And I don't say dance, because then you're going to have an idea. We all have ideas in our heads. Oh, it's waltz, it's salsa, it's electric slide. No, this is our dance, our individual dance. Our dances are going to be different. And if there are 2,000 or 200,000 people watching it, there are going to be 2,000 or 200,000 different kinds of dances, because we're all different. And that's all it is. And it's a beautiful practice to do at the beginning of the day, especially if you're low energy. I did this every day for long periods of time, or at the end of the day when you're coming home from work, to get rid of the tension that builds up in the course of a workday.
Awesome. So I want to talk about one more that you did for a long period of time, but you triggered another thought. You're triggering a lot of awesome thoughts here today, Jim, which is, I want to go, since you're talking about indigenous people and talking about shaking, I feel like going and grabbing from downstairs my djembe drums and starting to just pound on these African drums and see what that does to the body.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way of getting out the feelings. It's a beautiful way of moving the body. And again, there are thousands of techniques. One of the things that's really important for everybody to realize is that there's no one technique that's perfect for everybody. That's one of the reasons why I want to make sure that I teach a number of techniques, and then you find the one that calls to you, the one that feels right, or the 2 or 3 that feel right. Start with those. See what happens. We're all potentially, and as little children, we're all scientists. We're all doing experiments. Let me see what happens if I push this glass over. Let me see. So, but we need to bring back that kind of experimental, playful mind, to bring that back into our lives. And let's see which technique works. What's the benefit? What's the downside of it? And then find something that works and keep on doing it and using it.
Awesome. So let's go for one that you had asked Sham, if I understand, what meditation you should be doing and for how long. And he gave you a 6-month homework assignment. What was it?
Well, I asked Sham with some trepidation about this is about, I'd known him for almost 2 years before I asked him what I should practice. I was cautious, like many people watching. And he said, well, you remember that chaotic breathing? And I said, oh my God, because it's like this. And I said, how could I forget? And he said, do that for 40 minutes every morning. And I looked at him and he said, you asked. So I did that. I did that for 40 minutes every morning without fail, no matter where I was, for 6 months. And it made a profound, I was in my mid-30s at the time. It made a profound difference to me. I was able to deal with so much of my anger, the fears that were in me, my tendency to be obsessive and worrying. I can't say it all disappeared, but a lot of it went away. And I felt more energized, more in touch with my body. I walked more easily, moved more easily. I think I was able to focus better. That was the one for me, because I was this guy who spent a lot of time in his head, thinking about things, considering things, the Harvard education, yes, but, and what about on the other hand, and all this stuff. And I wasn't as fully present as I could have been. And there was tightness, a lot of tightness in my body. So this was the one that worked for me. I don't recommend it necessarily for other people. 40 minutes is a long time.
Can you show us that breathing for another 10 seconds there? Or 2 seconds?
You want to see it again?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's like this. Can you see me?
Flapping your chicken wings.
It's exactly. It's like a It's like a bird trying to take off or a crazed chicken.
Now, is
Now,
it going in through your nose or your mouth?
in through your out through your nose. If you breathe in and out through your mouth, you'll hyperventilate.
I was
Breathe in and
wondering how
out
you
through your
don't pass
nose.
out. Okay.
You'll be fine. Now, one thing I want to say, shaking and dancing, anyone can do. No physical limitations. This chaotic breathing with using all these, technically they're called the auxiliary muscles in your chest and shoulders,
Intercostals and
arms.
everything. Yes.
Don't do that if your shoulder dislocates, if you have very high blood pressure, like 190 over 120, if you've had a recent heart attack, if you've had a major damage recently to your neck or spine, or you have spinal metastases, or you're pregnant. Don't do it like this. You can breathe like that, but don't use all these other muscles. So, you have to be intelligent. Can't be dopey. If you want to do this transformation, it is a path that anyone can follow, but you have to use a little bit of discrimination as you move along the path. You have to pay attention to whatever cautions that I bring up, and you have to pay attention to your own limitations. But the other thing that you'll discover, I never believed that I could do that for 40 minutes. I thought 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, maybe. I was able to do it for 40 minutes. And I worked through so many of my fears, so many of my physical limitations as well.
It's interesting, and we're going to jump into a brief bit on emotions and guidance in a minute here, but it reminds me of a dear friend of ours on Maui by the name of Darshan, and he used to travel around Europe. I think he learned the technique in Sweden or would teach the technique in Sweden, which was 40 minutes of forced laughter, which is not as easy as it seems, and you end up crying, you end up facing all of your fears and your wounds, and all of it comes up. And I got to imagine that the breathing and the laughter do the same thing from just different techniques.
I think it's very similar. And I use the laughter and I teach the laughter, but usually 3 or 4 minutes is about what people can do. And it will bring up a lot, even in that time. Then you can increase the amount.
I started shaking. When I did forced laughter, I literally started shaking. And then I think I went fetal and was crying.
Yeah. That happens.
So let's
all of these expressive meditations and even quiet meditation can bring up emotions. One thing I want to say is that's not bad. We sometimes we get so afraid of having emotions, of being sad or being angry. I think part of this whole approach is saying, okay, we're suppressing our emotions, especially here in the United States. We need to allow them to come, to accept them. They're a part of us. They're not our enemy. And then as we accept them, they have much less power over us. They come and they will go.
There's an exercise I do with people where I'll actually have them have an emotion come up and, like a little child and picturing themselves, take hand in hand and go for a walk with their emotion and then have a talk with their emotion. And you talk about that here. Maybe you can tell us about dialoguing with an emotion.
Yeah, that's great. I love the technique. Yeah, we did, and there's a similar one that I teach in the transformation. It's about having whatever the emotion is. You have a dialogue. Let's say between mine is with sadness. So you write as fast as you can. You write down on a page your initial. For me, it would be J, and S. The dialogue is with sadness. So the first question comes from me to sadness, and I say, "Why are you here?" And sadness says, because when I have dialogues, the emotion that I'm dialoguing with is often a bit of a smartass. Maybe because I come from New York and that's the way people talk to each other. And sadness says to me, "Why do you think I'm here?" That's a dopey question. And I say, "Well, I don't know." And sadness says to me, "Think for a minute about why I'm here." And I start thinking, and I said, "Oh, I understand. It's the time of birthday. My son's birthday is coming up. I feel all kinds of emotions for him. My little girl's birthday is coming up. I haven't seen her in a long time. So even though these are times of joy, I can also feel the sadness of missing them." Boom. The answer is coming to me. Sadness in this dialogue, and you have to write as fast as possible. All the instructions are there in the book, but you write, why is it coming? And then you get the answer from the emotion, in this case, sadness, and then ask another question, just as I did. And the answers will keep coming. And it's an amazing way of accessing your intuition or your imagination. And anybody who can write can do it.
I love it. We teach a process called automatic writing, where each morning you go and you do a writing process similar to this, where you plug back in. And I think if you do this on a regular basis, so much comes up and out, and you discover, just like you're saying, there is no good nor bad, but there is an inner wisdom.
That's right. And it's there. We all have it. One of the great tragedies of our modern world is somehow we've been tricked out of or taught out of or educated, I put that in quotes, out of this inner wisdom. We think it's all about purely being rational, purely having book learning, knowing more, winning the arguments. Those all can be useful and can be important, but there's this other side. That's the yang, to
Yeah.
look at Chinese medicine. That's the
Yeah.
aggressive problem solving. But then there's the yin, there's the imagination, there's the feminine, there's the intuition. And we need to find a balance. So a lot of this work of transformation is about discovering or recovering that inner wisdom.
Thank you. In fact, let's go into the inner or the underworld for a minute. Let's talk about coming up with a guide, because a lot of what you're talking about, if we put it in shamanic terms or if we talk about it in indigenous terms, we're talking about soul retrieval work. How do we find our guide, and how can that help us?
Yeah, well, there's an exercise or an experiment. I like to think of these things as experiments
Yeah.
that I first learned actually, again, about 45 years ago from Ruth Carter Stapleton. She was a Protestant minister. She was President Jimmy Carter's sister.
Yeah.
And she taught the wise guide imagery. And so that's what I've been using it ever since. And it's a way of accessing our inner wisdom, our inner knowing. And so what I'm going to do is do two phases. I'm going to take us to a safe or comfortable place. And once, but using words, often I would use music, but I don't have to use music with it, bringing us to a safe or comfortable place, and then suggesting that we connect with, that we meet our wise or inner guide, and then have a dialogue with that guide, which is similar to the written dialogue on paper, but also different because it brings in all the senses that are available to the imagination: sound and sight and smell and feeling. So let me begin and take us all through this. And when the guide comes to you, accept whoever or whatever comes. Best not to say, well, I don't like that guide. I'd like another one who's better looking or more majestic or more cool or whatever it is. The amazing thing is this is calling on and learning how to trust our inner knowing, our intuition, our imagination. Okay.
Very good. And I'll
So
pause you for 1 second. If you're driving down the road, wait till you get home and you get a nice quiet spot that you can do this.
thank you. Very good. Very good to remind people of that, because you're going to want to close your eyes as you do this too. Okay, so sit comfortably wherever you are. Close your eyes and let your breathing deepen. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, with your belly soft and relaxed. Feeling yourself relaxed into the chair in which you're sitting. Feel yourself connected to the chair, or the bench, or couch, or bed, or floor. A little more relaxed with each breath. And now let the sound of my voice and your slow, deep, soft belly breathing bring you to a country road. It may be a road you know well, or one you've never seen before. It may be a path. Imagine yourself walking along this road, seeing what's around you, feeling the air around you, noticing if there are sounds or smells. Perhaps there are trees or grass, maybe running water, maybe the sun's out. Feel the air on your body. Hear the sounds. See what's around you. And now let the sound of my voice and the wind and sweep of your imagination bring you to a place that's safe or comfortable for you. It may be a place you know well, or one you've seen a picture of, or one you've never imagined till this moment. Make yourself comfortable in this place. Looking around, noticing if you're outdoors or indoors, what you see and feel, whether there are sounds. Notice what you're wearing on your body and your feet. And now become aware of a guide who's coming to meet you. The guide may be of male or female or indeterminate. It may be old or young, human, or perhaps an animal. A figure from scripture or a book, an ancestor, child. Just breathing deeply, allow that guide to appear. And introduce yourself to the guide and ask the name of the guide. And now ask your guide any question that comes to you. It may be something really small, like, what should I do with the rest of my day? Or it may be really important, like, how do I deal with this struggle in my relationship or this past trauma I've experienced? Feel free to ask whatever question you have. And wait for the guide to answer. You can think of the guide as your intuition or imagination, your unconscious, or a visitor from the spirit world. However you want to think of your guide is fine. Just ask and wait for the answer. And then continue to ask your guide whatever question seems to come next, whatever you'd like to know. And then feel free to keep asking and waiting for the answers. This is your guide. So if you're not satisfied with an answer, you can push a little. What do you mean? What else do I need to know? Or that's not clear to me. Or please help me. And continue for a bit, asking, receiving the answers. And now ask one final question if you'd like, knowing that you can come back and ask again another time. But one question now. And now thank your guide for whatever your guide has given, whatever answers you received. And let your guide go and become aware of yourself in your safe place, sitting comfortably. Perhaps noticing any changes since you met with your guide. And now let the sound of my voice bring you back to the country road and become aware of yourself walking on that country road once again. Aware of the sights and sounds, feeling. Now, slowly become aware of yourself sitting in your chair where you began this journey, breathing slowly and deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth, connected to your chair, connected to the earth. And now allow your eyes to open.
That was fun, Jim.
Good. And now we should after we get on, I'm enjoying myself so much. It was great for me. As you do this, you can do it for yourself. After it's good in the beginning to have somebody else lead, but now when I do it, I go to the place and I get the guide comes And it's great afterwards to write down what's come to you, whatever's come. Take a little time for yourself and write down what you've learned.
Woohoo! I couldn't help it. We were out on a hike, something you talk about nature as well in the book. We were out on a hike last week, I guess about a week and a half ago, where we rescued a little baby animal that had lost its mama, was dragging itself along the trail out in the sunshine, overheated, didn't even have its eyes open, was only 5 days old. A little vole. I didn't know what a vole is. And in this meditation, Nacho Mole, my vole,
Oh, great. And what do
came
you
to
want to share what your vole had to say to you?
yeah, and he's actually in the studio now, and he's doing great. And we're gonna raise our first vole, or he may be raising us. And he was saying it's about playing more, it's about being more present. And some of these things, because I know we get to play with him a lot as we raise him, and he'll chase your finger, and then you can chase your finger back. It's kind of funny. He'll play a little game of chase, little vole games. But one thing that a vole does that most other animals that we see don't do is he burrows deep. And he was sharing with me to dive into the wisdom. If you're going to meditate, dive into your meditation. If you're going, I get to go meet a whole bunch of Nobel laureates next week at a peace summit in Mexico I was invited to. Dive into each
Beautiful.
experience completely and fully. I hadn't heard that by playing with Nacho Mole, but in
Oh,
meditation, I got the dive deep.
beautiful. Oh,
So, and play
good.
more. Woohoo!
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Very, very
And
much
you
so.
know, these are so I mean, I do this all the time. Whenever I'm facing a difficult decision or going through a difficult time, I need to remember to do it. And when I do it, it's so helpful.
So, yeah, I did even ask at the very end. I asked some more strategy questions and got some guidance there. So, because you said you can ask anything, I'm like, all right, let's do this.
Good. Yeah, you can get very practical too. Yes.
So, th-
Wonderful.
thank you so much. I got two last wrap up questions here. First off, where can people go to find your beautiful book, Jim? I love this book.
Thank you, Michael. They can get it on Amazon.com. They can buy it in their local bookstore. The Transformation. It's today. You're here at the birth. Today is the publication date. It should be in all independent bookstores. It's definitely on Amazon. I know that. And please, if people read about it, read the book, and use the exercises, get in touch with me and let me know. It's jgordon@cmbm.org. And let me know what it's like and write reviews. Let other people know about the book too.
Awesome. And on top of your email, jgordon@cmbm, is that right? .org?
That's at cmbm.org. And people want to see how this work plays
Yes.
out with many different populations. Here in the United States, we're working in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School after the school shootings, and throughout Broward County and Puerto Rico after the hurricanes, Northern California. We're working a great deal with veterans, working in communities all over the United States as well as overseas. So people can look at it on the website. We have online groups if people want to do the work that's in the transformation in a group. We have people we've trained who are available, sliding scale, monetary scale, all the time. We have online groups. Um, and if you wanna be trained and learn how to do this work with others, we have training programs as well. So we welcome people who want to use this work with others.
Excellent. And that's, if I get this right, Charlie Michael Bravo Michael.org. Is that correct?
Yeah, Charlie Michael. Who was the second?
Bravo, CMB, or is it CMV?
CMB. Charlie Michael, Barbara Michael. Yeah.
Fantastic. And any last, Jim, so for those who don't know, beforehand we were talking, and Jim, you're going to be traveling around the country again, if not around the world. Some people would be throttling back at this point. I think you're putting on the afterburners here because you're on a mission, aren't you?
It is a mission. The mission is to share what I've been learning and continue to learn with as many people as possible, to invite people to become part of our community of healing and are a healer with us. The idea is to reach out to other people, and it's all an invitation. The book, The Transformation, is also an invitation to this internal journey. And my work at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine is about creating communities of healing wherever we possibly can. So it's an invitation to all those who are watching and listening to us.
Awesome. And any last words of wisdom you want to share with people, Jim?
Just that I've thoroughly enjoyed being here, and thank you. And thank you on behalf of the transformation, and I thank you as the author. I thank you myself. It's been a thoroughly enjoyable time with you.
It certainly goes both ways, and I'm happy to be here on a momentous birthday of your book today. So thank you for sharing the time with me today.
Hope to see you again.
Oh, would love it, love it, love it. And I'll tell you, as soon as we get off air here, I'll tell you about, we're starting a One Earth meditation, a One Mind Earth meditation to bring everybody together to work to heal and to raise consciousness.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Okay. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the transformation, and begin discovering wholeness and healing and peace in your life today. And shine bright.
Woohoo! Thank you, Michael.
I can't thank you enough, Jim. This has been phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. Until next time.
I just had the most beautiful, transformative interview with Dr. James Gordon. To find out more about transformation and healing inner trauma, click here.